Okay, so the RC10Talk Roostapalooza race is coming up in, I think, about 2 weeks. So, as usual, it's appropriate for me to make a video about what I'm going to bring to that race for each class. So I'm going to run all four classes. That's stadium truck, four-wheel buggy, two-wheel buggy, and Y2K. I've been kind of changing my mind almost every day about what I want to bring to this race, because that will also affect what I bring to other RC10 Talk races that will probably happen later in the year, as well as the Vintage Nationals. I really want to try to exercise as much of my collection as possible through the year, because there's more than one vintage race I'll be able to go to in the year. So I've been spending a lot of time playing around with, setting these, certain cars up I have for looser, bumpier tracks and other cars for more hard pack tracks. And, by spending a lot of money on tires and wheels, basically having every possible combination of wheels and tires across this roster for different surfaces and everything. So if I change my mind, I'm ready with the tires and everything else to bring, car A to this track instead of that track. So anyway, this is what I've settled on for the Roostapalooza. We'll start with Y2K. I'm going to bring my Kyosho RB5 SP2. Previously, I was using this in the silver can class at RCHR, although I only really got to race it once or twice there. But it was really between this and the Kyosho RB Type R, which I ran last year at the RC10 Talk race, the Fall Brawl. And I was leaning toward the RB Type R because it shares wheels with the RC10 B2. But most of the tires I have mounted to those rims are really for a bit more of a hard-packed track. I have a couple of tires for looser dirt, which is what the Roostapalooza is for. And so if I'm going to use those, I'll run them on the B2. And then later in the year, as that track gets more hard-packed, then I'll bring the RB Type R later on. But I have plenty of RB5 rims with like Goosebumps and those sort of tires to mount to this car. So I'm going to bring this. Should be quite good. I completely overhauled the setup. It previously had a turf setup on it. This is set up for a nice bumpy loose dirt track, so that should be good to go. For two-wheel drive buggy, the vintage two-wheel buggy, I'm bringing two cars, and I'm going to be testing them out and figuring out what I want to run. Number one is the Kyosho Triumph. This shares, I have it set up so that it shares wheels with the RB5. So I can sort of swap things back and forth, or I have a lot of RB5 or RB6 style rims with a bunch of different tires on it. So these should pair up pretty nicely. And in the past, I ran this at Vonats a couple years ago at RC Excitement. It did nicely, although at the time it needed a bit of work on the suspension and the gearing. I've since pretty much solved those problems, although we'll see how the rear suspension does. And then I tried it at open practice at the Vintage Nationals last year. It felt good, but I had some issues with the electronics, so I changed the speed control on it. Now it works fine. So really excited to properly give that a try. And then we'll see how that compares to the B2. The B2 is probably a bit lighter. The main feature of the B2 is that it has a Schumacher Visco drive on it. So whether or not you really need that for a loose dirt track, it really depends. It really depends on how the track, whether or by how much it ruts up throughout the day. If it starts to get really sort of beaten up and bumpy, then the B2 should do pretty nicely. Although maybe like later in the year, if we have another race on the track where it's hard packed and it gets blown out like it was during the Fall Brawl, this could be a better car to bring later in the year. So I'm going to bring it and try it, but depending on how the track is, I may or may not run the B2. I might save it for later and run the Triumph. We'll see. So those two for two-wheel drive buggy. For stadium truck, I'm going to bring my Kyosho Pro XRT again. This was probably actually the hardest decision for me to make because I have three really good trucks. I have the Pro XRT, the RC10 T2, and the Losi XXT CR, and they're all excellent. And I have like Goosebumps mounted to rims for all three of the, well, yeah, technically all three of those. And I also have, you know, other tires mounted, like if I want to go to Adrenaline RC for the Vonats, for any one of those trucks, it's good for that too. So really hard for me to decide what to bring for Stadium Truck to this race, because later this year I'd really like to try the XXT at the Vintage Nationals, even though I did really well with the T2 last year, and I want to kind of bring that back again, but I can't bring everything. So this is why, like, I really struggle with what to bring in a given year. But I've settled on the Pro XRT because I have a ton of RT6 rims with fresh tires on it for this kind of surface. And I if you check in my video history, sometime last year, I talked about doing the RT6 style quick mount conversion on the Pro XRT. So this should be really cool to run on this kind of surface. So I'm excited to do that. I don't want to beat up the T2 on that track, so I'm going to kind of save that one for later. And so we'll see, like if we do, you know, a race on a hard packed surface there later in the year, it might be this truck again, because this can take more of a beating. Okay, four-wheel buggy. It's down to two cars. I'll bring them both and evaluate them. On the right, there's my 1994 Yokomo YZ10. This is the one that I won the Vintage Nationals with in 2016 by 1/1000th of a second. So since then, I basically shelved the car and decided to sort of not race it, because I have other YZ10s I can run as well, and this one's kind of special to me because of the conditions under which I won that race. But I have other YZ10s that are set up for other things. So I figured, okay, I'll put a 13.5 motor in this, clean it up a little bit, you know, replace some worn out parts, and that should be good to go. And I'd like to see how that does against the XX4. This is one of two XX4s that I have. The other one, my friend Mark made for me, that has a 10.5 motor in it. This one has a 13.5 motor in it. And it's set up slightly differently. It's a bit softer. So I think this will do quite nicely on that track. Chances are I'll run the XX4. This car feels really nice. But as a backup, I always bring a Yokomo, almost always bring a Yokomo as a backup car, because it's very reliable. It's pretty fast. So if all hell breaks loose and I can't fix this thing in time, just throw the YZ10 down and I'm good to go. So that's what I'm planning for this race. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully I don't change my mind in the next 2 weeks, but this is the provisional list. Okay, that's it for now. Thanks for watching.